But I think the college element is very interesting for the homeschool conversation, actually, because I think for a long time, homeschoolers used college kind of as a benchmark for academic achievement. It's like, well, our kids didn't go to normal school, but they got into a good college. So clearly they got everything that they needed for out of their education. They're successful academically, and they're going to be successful in the real world because college is a proxy for your ability to be successful in the workforce. And I think for a long time, I think maybe it did serve its purpose in the homeschool community too, to kind of like prove that, like, we have all the statistics of, you know, homeschoolers' acceptance rate into colleges and all the anecdotes from college professors saying that they like homeschoolers better because they actually know how to study on their own and adapt to college in a way that public school kids maybe don't. But I find it very odd too that, like, this was kind of the journey that I went on when I was in high school and I was trying to figure out what to do. I mean, you know my story. I was a very academic kid. I seemed very much college bound, but I really didn't see the point, and it seemed very expensive and very much like a waste of time. But it was a tough sort of paradigm shift, even coming out of this very non-traditional K through 12 experience. Like, I think a lot of homeschoolers don't think that you can just buck the entire system altogether. Like, there's this sort of buy-in to, okay, we're going to bypass the normal system for now. We're going to bypass it like K through 12, but then we're going to re-enter the conveyor belt once this detour that we've decided to take is over. And I think that sort of paradigm of stepping outside of the system sort of conditionally for a certain period of time, or for like a certain phase of the system, but not, or the conveyor belt, but like, you know, not the entire thing. I think that's pretty common for people bucking the system at every stage. Like, I think people do that a lot. You see it with homeschoolers too. Like, we'll homeschool our kids through middle school, but then they'll still go to high school. Or like, we'll homeschool through high school, but then they'll still go to college. Or like, yeah, my kid was traditionally educated. They decided to skip college, but then they're going to step back on the normal career conveyor belt. And so much of what your life has consisted of, but also the work that you've done, has been a much more holistic system exiting, where, you know, you haven't really taken the traditional path anywhere all that much, and you've built programs and companies that help people not take the traditional path even more, in everything from, you know, skipping college all the way through like changing how people think about career trajectories. I mean, you're a multi-time founder. You're definitely not on the normal career path building your own things. But I find it's so interesting that people have such a hard time with this paradigm shift of holistic exit as a, like, I don't know quite what the right terminology is. I feel like we need to coin a term for this, but you know what I'm getting at.
Totally. Well, I almost might challenge the framing and reframe it a little bit too. So
yeah, please.
If you view it as like, here's sort of the system, the conveyor belt, which is a very apt term, and you have, you know, little segments of it, but it's all basically one in most people's mind. You have your, you know, elementary, middle, high school, college, and then maybe there's even something after college, conveyor belt. And there's little versions of that. Well, maybe you do community college, or maybe you do whatever, but that's the whole thing. And I think homeschoolers accept that framework. And basically it's like, what happens at the end of the conveyor belt? What's weird is nobody even talks about actual career. Like, the conveyor belt's purpose theoretically is to prepare you to succeed in life, but nobody uses your success in life as the way to measure the success of the conveyor belt, even though they say that's its goal. So they're literally like, my kid graduated with honors from this university. That in itself is the status symbol. They could be living at home in my basement, utterly depressed, with no friends, no job, for 3 years, and like eating chicken wings on the couch all day. But you will still hold up as they succeeded on the conveyor belt because they graduated with honors from this university. And no one will judge the conveyor belt for the outcome, which is the weirdest thing ever. So weird. So homeschoolers will look at that and say, this conveyor belt seems kind of crappy in these early segments. Let me replace it with my own version, my own thing, whatever that is. Get off the conveyor belt, or maybe there's a different version of a conveyor belt. There's all sorts of variation. And then to prove that me opting out worked, I will make sure they graduate with honors from X university. And then hold that up as, again, not what do they do in life? Are they happy and successful and kind and have friends and a rich life? No. We need something that's an easily digestible status symbol that everyone else uses to compare against everybody else. And I can be like, homeschoolers do better in college. They go to better schools and get better grades and graduate with more, honors and whatever the heck. And it's like, okay, but you saw that was kind of a silly way to go about education earlier in the faith. Why is that still the symbol? So the way that I like to reframe it, rather than you have to choose between conveyor belt and exiting the entire system, I like to see it as like, start with you, the individual learner, or the parent of your learner. Start with them at the center, the individual human being. What kind of things are going to make for a valuable education? What is the purpose of education? To improve them and to make them have a better life, be a better human with better morals and integrity, have a more fulfilling and productive life that is useful to themselves and others, right? Whatever the standards are that you utilize to judge that, most people's are frankly fairly similar, but there's some variation. That's the goal of this thing we call education, of growing up, of raising a child, of having them learn how to go out and live independently in the world and have a good life. Start with them at the center and then see everything else around them as potential tools in that toolkit. And you don't have to throw out the tools of college or high school or public school or private school. Those are all part of the toolkit. At any given phase, look at the various things in front of you and say, given this phase and this stage and what I think is the most valuable and important for this young person, or if you are the young person or person in general, what's the most valuable and important for me in this stage? What would it be better to enroll in the local public school, enroll in a private school, be unschooled, go apprentice at a company, be homeschooled on a rigorous curriculum, be homeschooled on a loose curriculum, do some combination, like look at all the things out there and choose one at a time. And if you look at it more a la carte, and like you go to a high school for a year, don't look at that as I chose the conveyor belt. I need to be the not school person. Like don't wrap your whole identity for all time in being in the system or being out of the system. See all of it more practically than that. These are all tools floating in orbit. I mean, for myself, I was homeschooled. I went to community college my last couple of years of high school, not because I thought it was amazing. I actually enjoyed like maybe a quarter of the classes and maybe would have taken them just for the heck of it. I don't know. But I thought I needed that degree, right? So then I transferred to a 4-year institution, paid my way through, wish I wouldn't have, total waste of time and money. Didn't know that at the time, right? Later on, I got a master's degree and I would do that again, not because it did anything for my career in any way. And it was because someone offered to pay for it for me. And it was a really cool way. It was a very unique program in Austrian economics to force me to read all the books that I wanted to read, because someone else was paying for it and I would feel guilty if I didn't go through and read them all. And I just read like tons and tons and tons of books on Austrian economics. The fact that that was a master's degree at a university, that like rubs against the rebel part of me that's like opt out of the system. But it's like, here I am presented with this thing. Do you want to go to classes one night a week for a year and a half for 3 hours a night where you're being taught Austrian economics and you're being assigned all these books and somebody else is going to pay for it? I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. That was an option in the toolkit, right? So like my own kids, my son, when he got to about 14, 15, he wanted to go to school. He wanted to go to the public school. He went to public school for like a year and then was like, okay, I don't like that anymore. Now, I didn't say, no, we are principled unschoolers. We will not go to school. Once you're to the age where I felt for him at that age, he wanted that. He wanted to try it. And I felt like that was important for him to try it and see it. And if he had wanted to finish there, I don't care. If any of my kids want to go to college, I've told them I'm not going to pay for you to go to college because I think it's a waste. If you want to go to college, go to college. I'm not going to stop you. It's not like this is an anti-college family. I want all of these things for everybody, right? Like look at the landscape, say, what do I want? There are certain things where you're like, hey, maybe I hate the fact that the government makes it legally required to get a degree in order to be an accountant, but I really want to be an accountant. So I got to go to college. I'm not going to be like, no, you can't. If to you that's worth it, it's worth that cost and you want to do it, of course, by all means, right? But I think just changing the paradigm from one where it's like, I either accept the system and do everything it tells me to, or I opt out of the system and I can only do things that are outside of the system. Forget about that. That's not focused on what you want enough. It's too focused on other people and their status and their goals. Most people are stuck in the, I need the status symbol that everybody else accepts, even though it's totally dumb and worthless and literally has no bearing on your ability, skill, intelligence, or worth as a human being. That college degree, dumbest signal I can imagine, but people want it and they get obsessed over it. But there are also people, few and far between, but I have run into them, who make the rejection of that status symbol their own status symbol. And they're not thinking so much about what's actually serving me at any phase in life, but they're like, as long as it's not college, it's like, I'll never, and if I'm like, hey, this is a really cool, whatever, there's this really cool opportunity here. And it happens to be a class offered at a university. And you're like, boy, I really would enjoy that, but I can't do it because it's at a university and I don't want to sully my name. Like, to me, that's kind of like, okay, you kind of lost the plot a little bit, right? So that's all kind of a way to reframe it and to say, always bring it back. At any phase, at any stage, what do I want? What are my goals? What are all the options available to achieve those goals? Not for all time, just for this next stage. And which ones seem the most likely to help me move forward? And be really honest about that. And it's usually what creeps in is, what will other people think of me? And when you're acting based on that and you raise kids up to act on that early in their life, their whole life is going to be that way. And that's a hellish way to live. They're going to live where other people want them to live. They're going to dress how other people want them to dress. They're going to believe what other people want them to believe. They're not going to know who they are. They're not going to have a self, right? So like, start early on. Why would I go to school for a semester, a day, a year, or would I not go to school? Just because I have to, so other people think that I'm a certain thing? That's a terrible reason, right? So like that just shatter the whole frame altogether and just think based on what you need.